My bad. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2022 Homeless Housing and Services Notice of Funding Availability Technical Assistance Training. I want to make just a couple of general comments before we get started. The first is that this is a different format for a Zoom than many of us are used to. This is a webinar format, and what that means is that participants will not be able to see themselves. We can see the list of participants, but only the people who are panelists on the webinar are going to show up as in video or show up on the screen. So please be assured we can see you as an attendee on the webinar, even if you can't see yourself. And we will be able to record attendance as long as you have your name correctly entered in the Zoom. The second thing I wanted to mention is that we are doing two different technical assistance trainings this morning. The first one is for general housing and homeless services for the notice of funding availability. This does not include the shelter request for proposals. If you're with an organization or a program that specifically has contracted with Kitsap County for a shelter program, you do not need to attend this TA session, and you should attend the one that starts at 11 o'clock instead, because things are a little bit different for the shelter program RFP. So that's why we have two different times when we're sharing information. There's a lot of the same information about how to access the application platform and all of that, but actually the way that the funding works is a little different between the two. So that's why we have a separate time for people who are applying for the shelter request for proposals versus the general homeless housing and services NOFA. So I see some of you on the participants are folks that I know work with shelter programs. You're absolutely welcome to stick around and listen to this TA session, but you should also, if you're planning to apply for shelter funding again, you will also need to attend the 11 o'clock TA session. All right. So I'm going to, just for everybody's peace of mind, I'm going to read off the list of participants or attendees that we have so far. So everybody is assured that we can see you and your attendance is recorded. I've got Amanda Dragon, Angela Yautsy, a second Angela Yautsy, a third Angela Yautsy, Bridget Glasspool, Britannia Eisen, Dana Walters, Jackie Brown, Katie Knutson, Sarah Moritz Fields, Stephen Sprague, Tamar Kupiec, Teresa Ballou, Tiffany Turnley, Zachary Lujan. There may be others that join us partway through as well. So I just want to assure those folks that we do have you on as attendees today. So let's dive right in to the technical assistance training. There will be an opportunity for questions at the end. You can also type questions into the chat, and we will do our very best to get those questions answered as we go. I may pause at certain points and specifically ask if there's questions, and please feel free to type those into the chat. At the very end, we'll also have an opportunity for questions, and at that time we will try to do a hand raise situation where you could have your hand raised and ask a question verbally at the very end. To be perfectly honest, this webinar format is a little new to me as well, and so we are figuring it out a little bit as we go along, so please bear with us. Corey is also helping out with the technical aspect of this. So I'm going to now share my screen and we'll go through the technical assistance slides. Let's see. So everybody should now be able to, Corey, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen share?
I cannot, no.
Not, okay, interesting. What about now?
Yes.
Interesting. I just learned something about how to use this platform. All right. Very interesting. All right. So we are all here today to talk about the funding that's available for housing and homeless services. We issued a notice of funding availability for this a couple of weeks ago, and that is also published on our coordinated grant application webpage. We'll talk a little bit more about why it's important to go ahead and look at the notice of funding availability. And as I mentioned, for those of you who just joined recently, this is specifically for non-shelter applications. So if you are applying for shelter funding or have been contracting with the county for shelter funding, you should plan to attend the 11 o'clock technical assistance training. You're of course welcome to stay for this training as well, but you should also attend that one. So this one is for funding of all other types of housing and services related to homelessness. We went through a couple of housekeeping items. We'll have time for questions verbally at the very end. If you have questions along the way, you can go ahead and type them into the chat. And please make sure that your name is correct on the participant list on the Zoom. My name is Kirsten Jewell, and I'm the manager of the Housing and Homelessness Division for Kitsap County Department of Human Services. I also have on the call with us Leah Nolden, who is our brand new contracts coordinator. She's waving right now. She's the person that will be working with you specifically on your contract after the awards are made, and then also on reimbursement requests, and also on compliance and monitoring. Corey, who I think most of you know, is our awesome program specialist and technical data specialist. He is continuing to work on HMIS, technical support, reporting requirements, and all kinds of other assistance with performance metrics and data collection.
Good morning, everyone.
Hi, Corey. Thank you. So today we're going to talk about the 2022 coordinated grant process. Just a little bit of background information. I think most of you have seen a lot of this information in the past, but we do have a few new folks on the call as well. So I want to make sure everybody has some good background. Then we'll talk a little bit about the cycle schedule, the application, some important reminders, and then Corey's going to take it over and talk specifically about the brand new application platform that we have moved to called SurveyMonkey Apply. This is different than the Fluid Review application platform that we've been using for the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. So we want to make sure you have good information because it's going to be a different process, look different than it has in past years. And then we'll do a little review of the application and awards process, and then give you some information about how to get help and questions. And then take questions. So we just globally, for those of you who were around for the 2020 cycle, we have decided to make as few changes as possible for this cycle. Everybody has so much on their plate right now, and the world has changed so much with COVID that we wanted to try to keep at least one thing as sort of unchanged as possible. So the vast majority of this process and the questions on the application are the same as they were in 2020, with a few exceptions. And the biggest exception is, of course, that the platform that you apply on is different. But again, there's some folks who may be new to the process, so we want to go through all this information to make sure that they have the same information that folks who've been through it have. So we started working about, I don't know, I want to say like 5 or 6, probably 7 years ago now, on a coordinated grant application with our kind of sister division, the Community Development Block Grant and Home Program, which also funds affordable housing and social service programs. And we wanted to come together to make a much more coordinated way to do our grant making, instead of having every agency have to apply to multiple funding sources and having multiple grant contracts. We really streamlined it quite a bit, and we've been evolving that process now over the last 6 or 7 years. This year, again, similar to what we did in 2020, we are having a 2-year cycle process. So the the next time that we'll be running this grant cycle will be in 2024, so in 2023 for 2024 funding. And we are again trying to target the funding more specifically through requests for proposals and notice of funding availability. For this cycle, we've got 4 different funding opportunities. The home request for proposals, which is generally funding for new construction of affordable housing and some rehab. We've got the CDBG, or Community Development Block Grant Notice of Funding Availability, which also covers some affordable housing programs. They are not accepting social services applications this year. They'll be doing that in the next year cycle. Those 2 programs are run by my colleagues in the Community Development Block Grant Division. And then the 3rd funding opportunity is the one that you're here today to learn about, the Homeless Housing and Services Notice of Funding Availability. And then, as I mentioned before, we have a 4th opportunity, which is a request for proposals for shelter operations. So this is very similar to what we did last year. Whoops, I could actually, I just realized I can make my screen bigger and better. So new things for this year, new application platform, which is SurveyMonkey Apply, which replaces Fluid Review. Once again, we've really worked hard to realign our grant funding. There's been a lot of additional funding available through COVID-19, which has made the funding situation a little confusing and different. And there's some second funding layered over some of your contracts for COVID-19 specific activities. So we wanted to make sure that we're always trying to be as efficient as possible with our funding. Again, similar to 2020, our homeless services and operations and maintenance awards are going to be combined in one grant application. So you just apply one time for your program, and then we will make the award as appropriate for homeless services and operations and maintenance in a single contract. So the AHGP, Affordable Housing Grant Program, which is O&M funding, and the Homeless Housing Grant funding, which is more like services funding, those will be combined into a single application that you apply for, and also a single contract, similar to what they are currently. So as I mentioned, there's 2 different funding sources in this funding opportunity. There's Homeless Housing Grant Program funding, which is specifically targeted towards activities that are in the most recent update of our Homeless Crisis Response and Housing Plan. The priority for this is projects serving people that are unsheltered or chronically homeless, and they must contribute directly to their moving into shelter or stable housing. We can have up to 25% of the funding for new programs, but 75% of it is reserved for existing and ongoing programs for people. We also have the Affordable Housing Grant Program, which must benefit households at 50% or less of area median income. It has some eligible uses. We typically end up using this for primarily operating costs for emergency shelters, and then operations and maintenance for projects that have received housing trust funds or are eligible to receive housing trust funds. That's very specific in the legislation. So we prioritize these for emergency shelters and the operations and maintenance costs. And by the time we get through those 2 priorities, we generally don't have any funding left for other things. Part of the reason why it's prioritized this way is because there's other funding through the CDBG and home programs, which are available for acquisition, construction, and rehab of affordable housing. So our counties prioritize this funding source for the operating costs for shelters and operations and maintenance, because we have other funding that is dedicated to these other activities. We collect funding for this, for both of these grant programs throughout the course of the year. And so we haven't yet even tallied up the amount of funding that's available actually been collected for this year. So our best guess estimate is sort of roughly what was available the last time we did this process in 2020. So the funding amounts available may actually change a little bit by the time we get to distributing awards, because we haven't actually collected all of the funding and tallied it up yet for the last year. So the award amounts you can see on the screen are sort of estimates of what we were able to collect and distribute in the last funding cycle in 2020. So the cycle schedule is really important. It's available on the coordinated grant webpage. We've distributed in various different other venues. I think most notably for you all, the next key deadline for you is that the application is actually going live this afternoon. And then it is due on August 12th by noon. So make sure that you have all of your application pieces and parts submitted by noon on August 12th. We are doing some technical assistance training now, but there'll also be a chance if you have questions, you can email or call, and we can try to answer questions over the phone. Corey is probably your best first call with questions about this application, and especially technical questions. We'll be doing you may also block off on your calendar the agency interviews, which will be September 28th and 29th. We do not yet know whether we will be doing these remotely or in person. That depends on where we are with the pandemic. 3 months ago, it was hard to predict where we were now with the pandemic. So we don't want to make a prediction about that, where we'll be 3 months from now. So we'll definitely be contacting you after your applications have been submitted with more information about what those interviews are going to look like, and whether they'll be in person and where they'll be, or whether they will be remote. Then on October 7th, the grant recommendations from our grant recommendation committees will be released and published, and that'll open a public comment period with a public hearing and action by our commissioners scheduled for October 25th. And then we'll launch our program year on the 1st and try to get contracts out to all of you as quickly as possible. Before I go any further, are there any questions in the chat, Corey? You're muted, Corey.
Sorry, does not appear to be any questions in the chat.
Okay, great.
Just looking for my contact information, which I will include in the chat. Thank you.
Awesome. So the application is divided into 2 parts. This is a similar to what we did in 2020. Again, for those of you who participated in this cycle then. There is an organizational information component of the application. You only need to submit one of these applications, and then you can submit as many of the Part 2 program information applications as you wish. So your organizational information will be shared across CDBG, Home, Shelter, Shelter RFP, and Homeless Services NOFA. So you only need to submit one organizational information application. And that includes information about your organization, your board, your agency budget and financials, your fiscal and procurement policies, and a bunch of other policies and procedures that we're required to review. This is sort of your organizational eligibility application in a way, and we then review that for your capacity, eligibility, financial stability, performance history, and ensure that you're actually eligible to receive the funding. And we also do a risk assessment and to ensure that that Kitsap County is able to contract with your organization. If for any reason we find that your organization is not eligible, we will contact you and let you know that you've been disqualified. And then the second part of the application is the program information. So you have to submit one program information application for each program that you're applying for funding for. And this includes specific information about your program, the specific expenses and what you plan to spend the money on, your performance measurement, housing type, and the community need and impact, community partnerships, and then how your program fits in with the homeless crisis response and housing plan and the priorities for this funding. It also includes a financial component for the program budget and your other sources of financing, funding commitments, the board's role in fundraising, and your sustainability plan. we fully acknowledge that the funds that we have available are not sufficient to fully fund anybody's programs. We just don't have enough funding available in our county to adequately fully fund things. So we expect that agencies are also raising funds from other sources, business income, fundraising, other grants, donations, all typically go into a program budget to round out the amount that you need to actually operate your program. We often have discussions about whether this is the right approach and whether we should do this sort of spreading the funding around among a lot of agencies or just fully fund a couple of agency programs. And we keep coming back to the fact that we really value all of our community partners. And we hope that by having some county funding that you will be able to leverage that to get other funding from other sources as well. And that has seemed to work and seemed to be the case for the last 17 years. For the Part 2 program information application, the Grant Recommendation Committee and staff scores this, and they look at specifically the program soundness, how robust is your program, how able is it to carry out the goals, and then the community need and benefit. Why is this program needed in the community? What benefit does it provide? And then, of course, the financial feasibility, and that's again where that information comes in about what all are the different funding sources that you're able to use to support the program. If you're interested in seeing that application evaluation scoring criteria, the template was included in the notice of funding availability. So that's another reason to take a look at that document. A couple of reminders for the 2022 application. Again, there's two parts. Make sure you fill out part 1, the organizational information, and part 2, the program information. Corey's going to talk specifically about how to make sure you've submitted both of those. You also need to select your type of application, and there are some definitions included in the application online. And so there's different types of housing and homeless programs that we will fund. And these include kind of homeless outreach and survival programs, some targeted prevention and diversion, rapid rehousing in a kind of a limited sense. We have a very robust eviction prevention program right now and some rapid rehousing. So a rapid rehousing program would need to specifically serve a different type of population or population in different circumstances. Transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, permanent affordable housing, or other homeless services. As you define those, we're willing to consider those as well. And you need to also select the type of expenses that you're requesting funding for, because this goes back to what funding source will be provided for it. So building operations and maintenance versus program operations. So building operations is what do you need to keep the building lights on, the utilities, the building rent, that kind of thing. And then there's program operations, which is sort of who are the people who are running the program, what are the expenses that the people that you're serving are incurring, that kind of thing. And then we also have a category of case management for housing stability. This is really important. We all recognize that case management for housing stability is incredibly important. The goal is to kind of keep people housed or keep people looking for their next permanent stable housing. We have simplified performance measures this time. You do still need to complete a county performance measurement worksheet, which is essentially a logic model, again, same as 2020. You'll see in the application that we've really eliminated a lot of the performance metric specifics. And the reason for this is that two things. First of all, we used to have you report on your past performance for the prior year. And I think everybody can agree that it was an incredibly unusual year. And so performance for last year, and even for this year, is probably not a very good indicator of kind of your regular performance when we're not in a global pandemic. So we didn't think it made sense necessarily to have you kind of reporting on this very anomalous data. And the other piece is that the Department of Commerce is in the process of developing brand new performance metrics at the direction of the state legislature, and those will probably be ready around the beginning of the year. And so we will be contacting you and holding agencies accountable to performance metrics as soon as we know what those are going to be from State Department of Commerce. I'm fairly certain that those performance metrics will still include things like exits to stable housing, because I think we can all agree that that's an incredibly important one. But there may be some other ones, and we will definitely be in constant contact with our contractors about what the state performance measures and metrics will be, but they have not issued those yet. So we have not asked you to make projections about performance in the application, but we do want you to continue to report on additional performance measures. These are required. And this is essentially how your organization is evaluating your success. How do you know if what you're doing is meeting the program's goals? And how do you know if it's something that is working? I think sometimes this is actually an afterthought. People are really focused on the sort of the required performance metrics. But I really encourage you this year to focus on these sort of additional performance metrics and have conversations with your board and your staff and your clients or tenants about how do you know if what you're doing is working? How are you internally measuring your success and then adapting if it's not successful? How do you know if it's a failure? How do you know if you should stop doing the program because it's not really working? How do you know if it's working great and you need to do more of it? All of those things are really, really important. And we really highly encourage you to spend some time seriously considering these additional performance measures and what they're going to be, and then report them on your application. You're also required to have a complaint process and attest that your service is not conditional on religious on the participants participating in religious activities. Please also really focus on getting that program budget filled out correctly. I have been running an application cycle for, I think, 17 years now. And every year we still get people filling out their budget incorrectly. Fill in the white boxes only. We've tried to make this easy by encouraging you to only fill in the white boxes. Do not mess with the gray boxes. Those automatically total in some things for you. And if you overwrite those cells, it will cause a lot of problems for you and for us. So please just fill in the white boxes. And there are also instructions included on one of the tabs on the Excel worksheet. So if you have questions, you can refer to those instructions, or you can contact Corey or me, and we will try to answer your questions about the budget. We'd rather have you fill it out correctly than our grant recommendation committee citizens not understanding what your budget is and then not funding you at the amount that that you could be funded at. And then the last section is really around board participation and fundraising. How are you raising those additional funds needed to round out the funding needed for your program? I think I talked a bit about project budget. You also need to provide your sources of financing. So what are those other funding sources that are going to pay for the rest of the cost of the program that the county is not able to cover? Performance measures, I'm really hoping will be less of an issue this year because we're, as I said, we've eliminated some of the specific performance metrics that we had been asking people to report on last year or last time. Please make sure that you review your application carefully and that you don't miss any of your uploads, especially on the organizational application. That's a common mistake. If we don't have all of the uploads from documents that are required, we may have to disqualify the application if we don't have enough information to evaluate whether your organization is able to carry out the program or be eligible. And then we also have issues a lot of times with the background about what the program does. I think sometimes people assume that the application review committee has as much knowledge about your program as I do, or Corey does, or Leah does. And you have to pretend that they know nothing about your application, that they know zero. They've never heard of your organization. They've never heard of your application. Pretend you're telling a complete stranger about your program and what it does. And that's a great starting place. Nothing is too basic. It's super important because sometimes people sort of dive in the middle and make assumptions about what people know. And then the grant recommendation committee has no idea what you're talking about, why the program's needed, what it's trying to do, why it's important, how it actually works, what's the benefit to people. All of that can be very mysterious. And the last thing you want is your grant recommendation committee to not understand your program, because that's when they tend to not fund things. And then the last thing is really make sure you explain exactly how the funds are going to be spent. There's a question that asks you to just describe how your funds are going to be spent. So be really clear about X amount is going to pay program salaries, and X amount is going to pay for case management for housing stability. We'll need X amount to support the program operations and pay, sort of office expense costs. And then this amount is what's going to pay for, transportation or rental assistance or whatever it is. Like, just line it out again, pretending you're telling somebody who doesn't know anything about your program what you're going to spend the money on. And that is going to be really helpful for your grant recommendation committee. I thought that we might review the program budget and sources of financing, but I think we're going to do that in the context of the application review, so we won't talk about that right now. And with that, I'd like to ask if there's any questions before I turn it over to Corey to describe how you will be interacting with our new SurveyMonkey Apply platform.
Yes, you
Any
can
questions?
drop any questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand. I'm not seeing any hands raised, and I don't see
Okay.
anything in the chat at the moment.
Great. We'll keep on pressing on, and there'll be another opportunity for questions at the very end. Hopefully that means we're doing a good job explaining things. All right, Corey, take it away.
Okay, let me share my screen.
I'm going to stop sharing, and Corey is going to start sharing. I can see your screen now.
Okay, thank you. Just having to do a little shuffling. Bear with me, everyone. Okay, so for people that have...
Sorry, Corey, I do see a couple of questions now in the chat. One is, do you have a list of all the documents and information that's needed? That would be in the application instructions, correct?
Yes, and I will show where that is located on the application. So.
And the other question is, will this recording be available to view later in case there's anything I missed? I believe that we are recording it, although I don't know that we'll be posting it. So stay tuned. You can check back on the website and we'll make a determination if we're going to post the recording. But know that, Corey or I or Leah are available to answer questions if there's anything that you're concerned about. And there's also very detailed application instructions available as part of the application process. All right, go ahead, Corey.
Okay, so our prior platform for applying for the homeless NOFA and the shelter operations was called Fluid Review. They were acquired by SurveyMonkey, and our application process was ported over to that new system. There's a lot of similarity if you've used the Fluid Review, or if you're a new user. SurveyMonkey Apply is not difficult to use. It just understanding what pieces of the process you need to be able to complete is important to make sure that you're submitting a completed application by the due date. So I need to fix my sharing. Bear with me a second. So I'm going, let's see. All right, can you see the grant cycle webpage? No?
I could see your screen. I could see your screen.
Let me try this again. Okay, is this showing the coordinated grant application page?
Not seeing that. Just a minute. It looks like it's coming up.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, now it's showing. Mhm.
So I'm going to show you how to navigate to our application from this coordinated grant application page. So this has all the information about our coordinated grant application cycle. So there's a section here for community development block grant. And we have a section here for the housing and homelessness division for our shelter operations and our homeless housing services NOFA. The link, I'll include a link here once our application opens at 4 p.m. today to go to smapply.io, which is our portal for the Kitsap County Coordinated Grant Application Cycle on SurveyMonkey Apply. There is a brief overview of the site. There are a list of instructions available for the applications that are available through the site for the various grant sources. And you can see that there is a list of programs. These are the different applications that are open, including the dates that these launch and the time that the application closes. So as you can see, here's the Homeless Housing Services 2022 application. So I'll realize I'm not logged in right now. This is just publicly facing right now. If I go to more here, I can see more information about this grant. And there's a copy of the policy plan and all the resource links that you will need, including a download all zip. This includes all the documents used for the application. It includes the NOFA. It includes the application instructions to complete the organization information application, the application instructions for the homeless NOFA, which we'll be demonstrating here, and any of the attachments that are included on that application for your homeless program budget, your sources of financing, and your performance measures. So the instructions for how to complete the application and the questions that are included on the application can be found here in this homeless services NOFA for the application instructions. Right now, so that I can show that, so I can demonstrate how to use the site, I have the application process temporarily open so that I can demonstrate that. But I'm going to approach this as though I'm a new user and I've not used this site before. If you were previously on Fluid Review, user accounts were not carried over to this new platform. So if you are a new applicant or an existing applicant, you'll need to create a new account. And there is a link to register. So let me go back to my slideshow here. So you'll click the link to register and it will take you, to a simple registration form. Ask your name, your email address, and create a password, and that will create an account. Once you've started your registration, you'll be able to log in to the site itself. And you'll also receive a confirmation email with a link to verify your account. Is there a question? I'm trying to find chat.
I'll monitor the chat, Corey. It's really hard to do the chat and share your screen at the same time. There's a question asking, can we add other people to the link? like you can with Fluid Review. So can have multiple people working on the application at the same time.
Yes, and I will show how to do that with a short demonstration. So I will pretend I'm a new user. I'm just going to create one here. So when you are creating a user account, if you have multiple people that will be working on an application, I would have somebody that would be like an administrator for your group or your team register first. And so in this case, I will put that this email is for my administrator. I will create a password. Oh, it wants something a little more difficult to guess. And then tell them that you're not a robot. Okay, so I have created a user for the site, and it will then ask you some basic information about your organization. And so I will just let that autofill a lot of this information. Okay. So it'll ask just high-level information about your organization. Okay, now I'm successfully registered. And it will take me to a screen where it shows that I have no current applications. So so in your navigation bar, you have your user information about your account. You have programs, which are the applications that are available to apply for. And the My Applications are the ones that you have begun an application. So I've not started any applications. So if I click this link here, I can go to the View Programs. And these are the applications that are open for the various grant sources. There are some toggles here. So right now, this kind of defaults to a table view. You can also toggle this to a list view if you'd like to condense this down so that you can read just the titles of these applications. So there will be, so we wanted to discuss if you are applying with multiple staff members, multiple people need to access your organization. There is a link here for Manage Organization. So this is the basic primary information about the current user that I am. If I want to add additional members so that they can edit my applications and work together as a group, we can go to Members here. And there's a link for Add Member. And we'll just create a test here. And email. And we'll make this a manager. And then you can set a role if they are a non-administrator or organization administrator. So that allows them to manage who is on a team in this portal, or if they're just able to log in and edit applications that you've included them on. So you can set up to notify and then add. And that will then send a registration email to this user so that they can join in on SurveyMonkey Apply, and then you can add them into your applications if you want multiple people to work on an application together. Okay. All right, so let's now go back to our programs page. So for each application, there's two parts. There is you will need to complete an Organization Information 2022 application. So I will demonstrate starting that here. So I can click more. Just not a lot of details here, but to make sure that I can provide information for the first part of my application, you can click apply and you'll have to name your application. So I'm just going to call this test organization in this example and create application. So the name here is the name that you've given your application. It will be automatically provided an identifier number. And then here is the task that you will need to complete for this application. This is where you'd actually go through and complete the questions that are and the worksheets that are included for this application. Real quickly, I'll show adding a member or a team to this application. So if I wanted a manager or another staff member to come in and edit this organizational information application, I can add them here. And here's my other user that I had just created. And I can now add them. And now when they log into Fluid Review, they will see this application in their My Applications list. So I'll demonstrate. Now that I've started an application for the organization information, it now shows up under My Applications with 0 of 1 task complete. So I can go in and start. And then to work on my application, I can click this link. This will provide some information about the application that you're completing. And what is very important is this resource links. This would include any files that need to be attached to your application, the instructions for that application. So if I click this link here, it should open up the Word document file for the organization information application. Bear with me while my computer opens it up. And here it is. So this is all of the questions that are involved, that are included on this application, so that you can take this application's instruction sheet, you can fill it out, you can prepare your information to be input into your application online. So I will not go through and complete this whole organization information page, but I will demonstrate more of the housing and homelessness services application. So I'll go back to my applications. So this is this organization information is part 1 of your application. If you're applying for a homeless services program or multiple homeless services programs, you'll need to also create an application for this grant. So here's the Homeless Housing and Services 2022. It provides a little bit of background information about the grant. There's a link here to see the policy plan and the resource link. So this includes a copy of the NOFA, the general application instructions, which are like a PDF walkthrough of how to complete the instructions for filling out and working on your application online. So there's a general applications that includes some screenshots of walking through how to complete an application, how to create users, how to register for an account, how to begin answering the tasks within your application, what to do with downloadable forms, naming conventions for those forms that you'll want to include on your applications as an attachment, how to upload documents, and how to save and mark as complete once you've completed your application online. So that's in the general application instructions. That's kind of a general visual walkthrough of how to complete an application on this site. Then there's also the part 1 and part 2 application instructions. So here's the organization information and the homeless services NOFA. So again, this 2022 application instructions is the questions that are included in this application online. This application also includes 3 different attachments that you'll need to reference. There's a homeless program budget, a sources of financing, and a performance measures worksheet, which you'll download these documents and attach them to this application. And there's also a download all. I have included a zip file with all of these documents in there. So I will begin applying for this application. And so we'll give it this a project name. And so the naming convention is agency name or acronym and project name. So I've included my agency acronym, Kitsap County Housing and Homelessness Division, and a project name of Test Outreach Services. And I have this application set up so that once you begin an application, you should receive a confirmation email that you've started one. And that will include a link to this website, as well as information about the application number that's included. So again, if I wanted to add a member or a team to this application so that they can also work on this application as another user, I can add them here just like that. And now we'll walk through completing the homeless housing and services application. So again, a short description about what the application is, and again, all the resource links that you'll need. So these are all the same attachments that I had discussed earlier about the instructions and the attachments that are included with that you'll include on your application, the worksheets, and the budgets. And so like any other form online, it's just about filling in a lot of basic information about the program. I'm just going to demonstrate that there's on this application, there's several selections for program types that you can choose. In this one, I'm going to walk through this example as though I'm providing a rapid rehousing and a homeless outreach service through my program. So there we go. One of the reasons that I wanted to walk through is selecting these services that I have is that depending on which services your program provides, if it provides any type of housing type services, there is a second page that will ask some performance measures about your program. And if you do not provide those services, it will skip that page. So there's a little bit of branching involved with this application. So we'll put in a summary, some program goals. Agency information. So I'm just quickly filling this just so I can show a little bit about how this branching works. So we'll say that I'm requesting, so this is the type of expenses. We'll say that I'm requesting expenses for homeless housing and service program operations and case management. And we'll provide a program narrative. History. We'll talk about our staff and challenges that our program faces. Now here's where we run across where we need to upload a file. So in this case, this is for performance measures. There's a 2022 Kitsap performance measures worksheet. I've included the link here so that you can download it, or it will be included in the the resources information at the top of the application. So this is what this worksheet looks like. So you complete this, you'd save it with your agency name or acronym and the program name, and then you would upload that file here. So I will demonstrate uploading that file. So realize I've not renamed this. It's just a copy of the same worksheet that I downloaded. And that is how you can attach a file. So we're talking about how many households are unsheltered. And then this question here, the housing type performance measure. So if you are applying for programs that provide rapid rehousing, transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, or permanent affordable housing, you will answer yes here. And so if you are answering yes, you'll be asked additional questions on the next page about your performance measures that you anticipate for the next year. If you do not, if you are only applying for programs that, let's see, if you are only applying for homeless outreach and survival, you will not need to provide a performance measure on the next page. There's also additional performance measures. So again, Kirsten was talking about how does your organization, your program determine if you're being successful or not. And so if you've had existing measures, you can base these off of any existing measures that you've used, or you can create new ones. So we'll just quickly say that we're gonna get 100% of people engaged in services. And for performance measure 2, we'll say that we're getting people engaged in some kind of a training program. Let's say we get 50% of applicants involved and expect 50% next year. And there's a third performance measure if you wish to include that. The third performance measure is optional, but the first two are required. And then how is your organization measuring success? And evidence-based practices that your organization has staff trained to use. And then you can provide additional information about other trainings to provide some more context about the training that your staff has for working with clients and guests. We'll provide information about complaint process. And our new question this year is about how is your organization working to advance racial equity? So that is one new question this year. And then if we choose next, because I have a program that has rapid rehousing, transitional housing, or permanent supportive or affordable housing, I have to provide additional measures here. And so these will be, if you have been, providing these services in the past, you likely have an existing performance measure on this that you can base this off of. But essentially what we're getting at for these measures is how many households are you going to serve in 2022? So let's say we'll serve 100. And how many will exit in 2022? And so that could be existing households that are already enrolled that leave during 2022, or new households that start and leave within 2022. So let's say that 80 households leave. And how many of those go to a permanent housing destination? In this case, we'll say, for an example, 75. We can go next. Now, if you are not providing any type of housing, rapid rehousing, transitional housing, or permanent supportive housing, you will not be asked those performance measures. Your application will skip to this page. So you'll provide information, again, about community impact. Intake and eligibility. And if you have, and you can check these boxes if you have a non-discrimination policy and if you're not engaged in religious activities. Come on, mouse. Let's scroll. All right. And community collaboration and consistency. Sorry, it's taking me a walking through every single question on here, but I wanted to show you what happens once you're at the end of an application. So our 2022 priorities. So one of our priorities is if for programs that serve people experiencing chronic homelessness or unsheltered homelessness. And if you prioritize based on vulnerability or need, and if so, how? And if your program uses a low barrier model for program entry and client participation. And if yes, then you will also need to provide information about how your program is low barrier. Okay, now we're on to our program financial information. So this page will include worksheets that you'll need to complete in Excel. So the first one is the program budget. So there's a link here where you can download that, or it will be included in the resource information at the beginning of the application. So this program, homeless program budget. Open that up here. Maybe. There we go. So this is the 2022 homeless program budget worksheet. There are instructions included on how to complete this worksheet that you can refer to. There's also this budget form. This is where Kirsten was talking about that you only want to complete the white cells. So we do have this at, oh, let's enable editing. So we do have these cells locked, so you should only be able to edit cells that you need to edit. But again, this is where Kirsten said we have formulas here. Do not unlock and mess with these formulas because it will affect the your ability to complete this worksheet and have accurate information. You also notice down here at the very end, the program budget, that there's this, that this final cell must match your sources of financing budget total. That is another Excel worksheet that you'll need to attach to your application. So I will say that I've completed this. I'll rename it to my organization acronym and my program name. And then I will take and attach this homeless program budget here. The second form to download and complete is the sources of financing.
Sorry, can we go back for a second? I just want to make sure on the bottom of the program budget form, it has a section where you have to fill in the annual number of individuals that the program serves.
Yes.
Please don't forget to do that. We had a lot of people forgetting to do that in the last cycle. So please fill this out. This is something that the grant recommendation committee members do evaluate. So please don't forget to fill that in. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So the 2022 sources of financing, again, I can download it here or it's included in the resources links at the beginning of the application. And so you will complete this worksheet as well. As you'll notice, there's also this yellow cell here at the end that is the total. And again, this must match the program budget total. So both of your worksheets that you submit with this application should have this same total amount in order to make sure that these match. So we'll upload this file, we'll attach the sources of financing. And then there's a funding commitments. This one is optional. So if you do have funding commitments, you can upload that here. If you do not, this is a question that you do not have to have an attachment for if you do not have documentation for it. There's board and fundraising and sustainability and request rationale. And now we finally hit the end of our application, and then we can mark it as complete. Now, marking an application as complete, it seems that there's an error. I need to go and fix this. So that will be corrected this afternoon. So let me just add something on here real quick. So marking an app.
So Corey just
Sorry.
demonstrated how easy it is to upload the wrong file. So really, really highly encourage you to go through and carefully make sure that you've uploaded the correct files. Don't, doing placeholders is really tempting, but if you forget to go back and you haven't uploaded something and we don't have all the information, then your application might be disqualified.
Okay, once I've hit mark complete, this will show a completed copy of the application that I've submitted so I can review everything that has been included. If I find that there's something that I need to change or correct, you can press these three dots here to go in and edit, and that will take you back to the application. If you have reviewed this and you are happy with it and you're ready to submit, there is a link here to submit. So marking as complete does not submit your application. Once you've reviewed and you have marked this complete, now you may submit. And we'll ask you if you're confirming the submission. Yes, you can click this button to submit. If you, they'll say that your application is submitted. You'll also receive an email saying thank you for submitting your application. Now, if I go back to my applications here, you can see that this application for the this Home Services has been submitted. And you can see this nice big green check box. You will need to have both of the organization information and the homeless housing and services applications completed. They should both say submitted before the cutoff time for this application, which is August 12th at noon. Okay. Let's see. Is there anything else that I need to touch on? So yes, again, there's two parts. You need to have both parts, the organization information and the homeless services NOFA completed. Both of these should say submitted. If you submit prior to the application closing time, and you find that you need to go through and make an edit or a change, you can do that up until the application closes. So let's say I found out that maybe a staff member is changing or a different program manager. I need to update that information in this application. I can return to this application. I can go into this task, which is that I had completed. And now I can go back in and I can edit this application from here. So you can edit all the way up until the deadline, noon on August 12th. So after that, your applications will be locked and you will not be able to go back in and edit, though you will be able to view and download. Okay, so I will leave that open for any questions about Fluid Review. You can raise your hand and I can unmute you, or you can include it in the chat or Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment.
Corey, there's two questions in the actual Q&A.
Yeah, trying to dig around for where it is. Oh, I do not see any open questions. Sorry.
So Amanda is asking if you've used Kitsap County Coordinated Grant Program for a different division, do you need to create a second login?
No, you do not. So your user account, you can apply for the different grants that are out there, whether it's from the city of Bremerton, the CDBG division, or our division. One user account can apply for all of those grants.
And then there's another question from Amanda, but I'm not sure I understand the question. So Amanda, you might need to provide some information, but it says if the administrator will be the same. So maybe that applies to the first question that she asked. If you could provide, if you still have a question, Amanda, if you could type it in the chat or the Q&A. Not sure we understand that second question. And then a question from Teresa, will we see if another person in our agency has done this for another part of the coordinated block grant cycle? Example, they applied for the rehab grant with CDBG and submitted the organizational information with that application.
I do not have an answer for that. I don't know if you can only see the applications where you've been included as a team member, or if you can see all the applications for your organization. I do not know the answer for that. I will have to find that out. It's a good question. Thank you.
Are there any other questions on SurveyMonkey Apply specifically? We will make the slides available at the very least, and we'll try to figure out if we can post the video. I just don't know if we're able to do that or not, since it's such a huge file. But Corey's done a great job in the slides of kind of summarizing a lot of the information and where to find things. So hopefully that will be helpful. And obviously you can contact him if you have any questions. Our contact information is on the NOFA, the RFP, the policy plan, and the coordinated grant page, web page. So it should be pretty easy to find that if you need it. I am not seeing any other questions at this time. So we will continue on. So I'm just going to wrap up the presentation, the TA session, with a little bit of information about the review and awards process. So once you've done all that work and gotten all your application, your two parts of your application submitted, then the staff picks it up and we will start with doing that risk assessment and eligibility review, making sure that you have your organization and program are eligible. And then the second part of the review is that eligible applications are reviewed and scored by the staff and the grant recommendation committee. They're scored for our organizational and financial capacity, program soundness, community need and benefit, and then program financial feasibility. And as I said, you're welcome to take a look at the sort of scoring sheet, eligibility evaluation. Those are all part at the appendices of the notice of funding availability. Then those applications that are eligible are reviewed, and then we move to the interview phase. We're not sure yet this year whether the grant recommendation committee will want to send questions ahead of time. We have experimented with that in the past, sometimes sending some agency questions ahead of the interviews just to make sure that they can prepare information. We will be discussing this with the grant recommendation committee, so I'm not sure what they will want to do yet. But make sure that the person that you put on your application as the contact person is actually available during the time frame between when you turn the application in and when the interviews start, so that if we email them, they won't be on vacation and we'll miss out. So make sure that that contact information is correct in the event that we do email questions ahead of time. And then in August, after we've received your application, I typically send out a note asking if there's any conflicts that we should be aware of. We do try to work on people's schedules, but ultimately, we're juggling a lot of interviews. So they will be scheduled for August 28th and 29th. We really highly encourage you to just block out those days on your calendar and not schedule anything else until we have oh, I'm sorry, that's a typo. The interviews are actually September 28th and 29th. So I apologize. This is a typo on this slide. So the interviews are September 28th and 29th rather than August 20th and 29th. So we'll fix that when we post this slide. The interviews are 20 minutes long. Generally, you can bring anyone you want to the interview, but you might be well advised to include anybody who can answer questions about the overall agency and the specific project. And then the grant recommendation committee discusses the projects and makes recommendations for funding. And then behind the scenes, we actually match the funding sources to the projects based on eligibility for funding sources. So you don't have to apply for a particular funding source. If your program is recommended for funding, we'll figure out which funding source best matches that program and match those up. So you'll just get the funds. And then the recommendations are finalized and as I said, posted on October 7th to the coordinated grant webpage. And forward to the Board of County Commissioners, who open a public comment period from October 7th to the 25th. Then there's a public hearing and action at the regularly scheduled Board of County Commissioners meeting on October 25th. After that, we start contracting. Just a quick note here. I really hope that all of you are signed up for the Gov Delivery Alert System, which is how we generally communicate about these grant funds. Hopefully that's how you found out about this TA session. That's how you'll find out about when the awards recommendations have been released and when the public comment period opens. So I really recommend that you, if you haven't already, that you sign up for the Gov Delivery Alert System, which you can do on the homepage of the coordinated grant. And you somehow make that so that emails from that source don't go into your junk mail, because we are not necessarily going to email everybody and communicate this information. It's quite difficult to keep track of all the staff changes at all of your organizations and make sure that we've sent out information to everybody. So we rely on you to opt in to our Gov Delivery Alert System, telling us that you want to receive that information. And then you can manage that yourself. You can take yourself off the Gov Delivery Alert. You can add yourself. You can have other people from your organization add themselves. So it's really an opt-in notification system. So please, please, please sign up for Gov Delivery Alerts on the coordinated grant page. And that's how you'll get notified about information about these grant sources. If anything changes, if we find an error in the application, if there's some questions that need to get shared to everybody, it will be through Gov Delivery. So I really highly recommend that you make sure that that is something that you are signed up for and that you're receiving those emails. Obviously, technical assistance is sometimes really helpful. So if you have issues specifically about SurveyMonkey Apply, then you should contact SurveyMonkey Apply, because they do have technical assistance staff that can help you with like the technical issues. If somehow your login isn't working or it's not downloading or loading or whatever, they'll be able to help you with that. And you can access that by clicking on the little I in the circle at the top right of the SurveyMonkey Apply webpage and follow the instructions for their technical assistance. Obviously, they can't answer questions about the actual application narrative, uploads, forms, that kind of thing. And that technical assistance will need to come from one of the coordinated grant staff or division staff. So you can reach out to us by email is preferable. We're still working part-time remotely, so sometimes phone messages don't get to us right away. So my suggestion is if you have a question that you make sure you ask early and send us an email, and we are generally able to reply pretty shortly thereafter. Generally, Corey or I are the best people to ask for help. Leah is new to our staff and getting trained up on stuff, but has less experience and is really focused on, as I mentioned, on contracts and reimbursement requests monitoring. So I always recommend people start with asking Corey. He's quite expert in the fluid review aspect of this, as well as all the forms. So there's Corey's contact information. And if Corey's not able to answer your question, then he can either forward it up to me, or if you can't get a hold of Corey, you're welcome to try to contact me as well. If you really need us to sit down with you and make an appointment, we can certainly do that. Chances are it'll probably be a Zoom call appointment. Again, we're continuing to work remotely part of the time. So still trying to minimize our risk related to COVID-19. But do feel free to reach out. We'd rather have you get the application filled out correctly and all the information than struggle along or fill it out incorrectly or not include everything that you need to have it be successfully evaluated by our citizen review group. We really highly recommend that you do a little homework before you start your application, especially if this is your first time through. Take a look at the Homeless Housing and Services Notice of Funding Availability. That includes some good information for you. The general instructions that Corey pointed out are just sort of basics around this application overall. You can download the Part 1 application instructions and review that to see what you need to gather together in order to be able to complete the application, all the documents and information you might need to get from different people in your organization. And then the same with the Part 2 application instructions. It's great to start with that and just sort of collect everything that you need before you start filling out that application. That's what we highly recommend. You'll need to make sure you take a look at the homeless program budget so you know, working with your financial person in your organization, how you're going to fill out the program budget. Chances are it's different from how your organization budgets and the different budget line items that they use. So you'll want to talk with your financial person and share with them the program budget and make sure that that can get filled out correctly. Same with the sources of financing form. Please do make sure that you talk with your financial folks to understand how those two forms work together and that they're filled out correctly. And then the performance measurement worksheet also, you can take a look at that ahead of time, make sure you understand how to fill it out in the logic model format. Once you've done that, then we recommend you start going online and filling out the application. Once you've gathered together all the things that you're going to need to do it successfully, then start the application process through SurveyMonkey Apply. And you'll recognize these 5 tips for a great application from me. I've been saying these for many, many years, but I want to reiterate, make sure that you're telling the full story. As I said, don't assume that anybody reviewing your application has ever heard of your organization or heard of your program. Assume that they are from Mars and have never heard of you, don't know what you're doing. It really needs to be from the very basic level. We do have new grant recommendation committee members joining us this year to review your application. So many of them will have no idea what your program is or your organization is. So please really start from basics and answer the questions very thoroughly and completely. To that end, we really recommend that you have someone else proofread your application. So once you've sort of completed your application, print it all out, or have a friend sit down at the computer and review it all. Ideally, somebody not in your organization who doesn't know anything about your program or organization. So pretend they're a grant recommendation committee member and they're reading it for the first time. What questions do they have? Do they understand what you're trying to do? Is there any information missing that would help them really understand why your program is important to fund? We really recommend that you double check your math on the budget forms. Even though they're supposed to total everything up for you, I still highly recommend that you double check all the math. Sometimes mistakes slip through, and you want to make sure that this information is correct. And then make sure you've uploaded the correct forms. Corey showed you how you can really upload any form into the application. So if you go down the route of uploading placeholders, we've seen many, many times when people forget to go back and upload the actual document, or they upload the blank template for that document. It gets uploaded sometimes by accident. So highly recommend that before you hit that submit button, you go through and you double check, have I uploaded all of the correct forms, and the forms that I've uploaded are the completed form for my organization and not just the blank template. And obviously, I know everybody is so busy and overwhelmed and has way more to do than they can possibly get done, but we really recommend that you don't wait until the last week to start your application. I think we've given 5 weeks between the time the application opens and the time it's due. We wanted to give people ample time to have some vacation if you're scheduled to take some vacation over the next month. But really not a good idea to wait till the last minute to get your application started and turned in, because there's always something that comes up that you didn't expect. And we really want you to fill out a successful, complete application. We don't want to have to disqualify organizations or programs for being incomplete. And our goal is that every application that's turned in is the best possible application, so that we're evaluating your program on the program's merits and not trying to fill in the gaps or make guesses about things because we don't have full information about your program because the application's incomplete. And then just a reminder, that application is due on August 12th by noon. So you have to hit the submit button for the 2 parts of the application by noon on August 12th. There's some information and resources available to you. The Kitsap Regional Library for a long time has a funding information network partnership with the Foundation Center. This is a way to get some information about other grants that you might be eligible for, or resources about how to fill out grant applications. And then there's a couple of other Foundation Center online resources if you have not had a lot of experience filling out grants. I hope that you'll find that this one is relatively straightforward. We're not trying to ask any trick questions. There's no right or wrong answers. We would much prefer that you be very honest and straightforward in your answers. Don't try to tell us what you think we want to hear. Tell us the situation with your organization and try to answer the questions as kind of straightforwardly as possible, and that will serve you much better than a very vague kind of dancing around the issue question, answer. We can read through those. We've reviewed a lot of applications. We'd rather just hear from you straight what the issues are. If you're having challenges in your program, or if you don't have a good answer to a question, that's fine too. Just tell us that and tell us what you're going to do to get those answers or start working on that aspect of program improvement. Here is the application link. This will be posted on our coordinated grant application webpage this afternoon. I think, what do we say, by 4 o'clock today, Corey?
Right.
So by 4 o'clock, we're going to go in and make that little tweak and correction that we found going through it today. We're going to fix the slide that had error with the interview dates. We'll post the slide deck and the application link on the webpage by 4 o'clock this afternoon. And again, a reminder to go sign up for GovDelivery electronic notification system. Very important to do that. And with that, we're come to the end of our prepared presentation and would be happy to take any questions that you might have, either live or in the chat. So any questions? We'll just wait a couple minutes. I know we've thrown a lot of information at you. Didn't mean to be overwhelming, but we want to make sure you have a lot of information to be able to do a good job on this. And as we've mentioned, there are a lot of resources available to help you. All the instructions, the written instructions that you can download ahead of time and review, technical assistance from Corey or I. Sarah says the link is open. Can we already start?
No, I will be closing that. That was so I could demonstrate for this presentation.
So the answer is not until 4 o'clock today, but thank you for wanting to get a quick start, Sarah. That's awesome. Appreciate that attitude. Anybody else have a question at this time? I think Corey and I, just for full disclosure, Corey and I are planning to take a little bit of vacation time in the next 5 weeks. Especially in the early part of the next 5 weeks, you may not get an answer instantly back from us. But we are definitely around, especially the last couple of weeks of the application being open, to try to make sure we can answer any questions. Just happened our vacations are falling in the next couple of weeks. So I think we're both out not next week, the week after next. And then Corey will be back after that. And then we'll both be back for the last 3 weeks of the application being open. So don't be afraid to email us, but you just might not get an instant answer back in the next couple of weeks. But we will be more available towards the later 3 weeks of the application being open. Any other questions or comments or concerns before we end our webinar today?
If you'd like to ask aloud, you can raise your hand and I can unmute you.
Bev is complimenting us and saying thank you, that our explanations were very clear. So thank you, Bev. That's very kind of you. That is our goal. Any other questions this time? Thank you, Captain Dana. Great, glad that was helpful. That's the goal. We really just want people to be able to have complete applications. Well, this is always a fun and exciting time. In about 5 weeks, we'll get to see all of your great ideas for programs and your awesome applications. We're available if you need us for technical assistance, but hopefully we've provided you with all of the resources that you need and that it will be smooth sailing for you. Hope everybody has a great rest of your summer, and we'll be in contact late in August as we start scheduling those interviews for the end of September. All right, with that, we're going to end our webinar for today. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great summer.